Godzilla's looking a little green around the gills. This is your look at the new NECA Toys Godzilla vs. Biollante. This is slime-covered Godzilla. Emerging from a fiery pit in Mount Mahara, Godzilla returns to wreak havoc once more. Drawn to the Ashinoko Lake, the creature faces off against a hybrid monster created from the cells of a human, a rose, and even Godzilla. Will Godzilla's strength and power be enough to defeat the might and ferocity of Biollante, or has Godzilla met his match? Before we get to checking out another Godzilla release from NECA Toys, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall Godzilla vs. Biollante slime-covered Godzilla actually stands. Being that this is simply just a straight-out repaint to the one that we had gotten before, the height should be exactly the same. Stopping the tape measure to the very top of his head, regurgitating it to you, of course not covering anybody in slime, I hope, you're looking at the figure standing 7 inches exactly. And switching that to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure of Godzilla standing 17.8 centimeters tall. Of course, like I was saying though, this is a repaint to the one that we had looked at before, so we'll just move over slime-covered Godzilla in favor of his traditional OG colors of all gray. In both cases, it's the exact same figure released by NECA Toys, coming to us from the movie Godzilla vs. Biollante. Now, speaking of Biollante, I've heard the name pronounced differently. In the video game of Godzilla, Biollante is pronounced Biollante. In other cases, I've heard the creature be referred to as Biollante, and I assume that both pronunciations are correct. Nonetheless, though, as you can see, left to right, there's not too much that NECA has changed from one to the other, still taking the same exact mold and just dousing it consistently with this green fluorescent colored paint that's all over his head, his neck, his torso, and his arms. And while we're also on the topic of repaints, here's the variant that was released for Godzilla Tokyo SOS. Another re-release that NECA Toys took the existing mold, which worked already as it is, and decided to add a different color scheme of paint. The left side, of course, was Tokyo SOS Godzilla with the electrified yellow. And then, of course, on the right, the figure that we're going to be looking at, the Godzilla vs. Biollante, completely soaked and covered in, like I said, this green-colored slime paint. Like with the other release of Godzilla, though, he does come included with this fiery breath, an energy wave that comes out from his mouth. Doesn't change too much, actually, if we bring in the other one that came included with the regular release Godzilla. Short of maybe just, again, how maybe the blue has changed slightly, but I think it's just more stemming from somebody's probably going in there and hand-painting these. So I can't imagine that the blue is going to be in the exact same places on both the fiery breaths. But they are the exact same molds. Not much, not really anything has been changed, other than, again, maybe the placement of where the blue goes. They attach the exact same way. Obviously, you've seen one, you'll see this one as well. We're going to go ahead and open up Godzilla's mouth. Poor Godzilla. Just get your fingers in there. And then once that mouth is opened, then you're going to find that little square opening just at the back of Godzilla's mouth. And then you'll feed this through. There we go. And you've got something that looks like that. Now, I don't know, again, if I would decide to display this particular Godzilla with the fiery breath. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes, a lot of times, I may go back and decide later that I want to display the figure with it. So it's always nice that they do include it, even if at the time being, I'm sort of wishy-washy to the idea if I actually want to display the figure with it. For the time being, though, I'll just remove it. It's like a big giant tongue depressor that you would get at the doctor. Although that's quite the long tongue depressor. Anyways, we'll just move that to the side and we'll have a look at Godzilla. Now, during the movie, while he's fighting Biollante essentially just hoses Godzilla down with this sort of slime that comes out from its mouth. It comes out like a mist and just settles across the surface of Godzilla. Again, if we just reach off camera, because of course we're going to want to do some comparisons, we'll bring in the regular release Godzilla. Not much, again, has changed from the face. Although some of the sculpting does get a little more shrouded and covered when you look at one to the other. Whereas this Godzilla, you could very distinctly see the sculpt work that they put into this face. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this one because we've already talked about this one in his own standalone review. But certainly the point, though, is when you start looking at this one, all the paint work, all the sculpt work at least that they incorporated onto that Godzilla gets a little bit lost. Not lost necessarily where all of it gets hidden, but in a way, actually, the green enhances some of the areas like his eyes, for example. The eye, I don't know if it's just mine, but it looks a little a little bit of blood there in the corner of the eye. On the other side also has that as well, so there is a little bit of change up, as Godzilla is likely experiencing some allergic reaction to, of course, the fact that he's been sprayed by this. It's a really interesting color scheme that they added to him, and certainly like things like his face, as a result of it, kind of gets these little stripes on the side that then work a little bit more to the idea that he looks a little bit more feral-like your traditional Godzillas do. Nice small little teeth that they've got on the inside of his mouth there, the big nose and snout there on the front of his face. Nice detailing done on the interior of his mouth. Nice little slick coat of gloss that they've also added to the tongue so it looks nice and wet. But a nice little small touch, though, is adding that blood to the corner of his eye. I really, really like the way that they've done that, also on both sides. Now, not only is it just simply they've gone in and painted green to an existing figure, no, they've actually gone and made the body wet. If you look at it versus the one that we looked at before, clearly you can hopefully see, at least, that the body is got a sheen to it. Whereas this Godzilla body, the first one that we looked at, didn't actually have that. It's nice touches like this, not to mention as well, if you look really close to the skin, it's got all these little speckled sections where it looks like they just literally took a paintbrush and speckled the little fragments of yellow on there as well. And again, it works well considering the way Biollante sprays that onto Godzilla, that it would make sense not only would his body be considerably wet, but also he would have these little speckles of little different pieces that have come out of Biollante's mouth. Really, really nice the way that they've done that. Most, if not all, that green-colored slime is only painted to the front of the figure, still allowing those details to show through, but still some of it does make some appearances along the back area here. Notably, this one blade, this one little spike platelet that sticks up from his spine, happens to have gotten a little bit of green on there. Nowhere on the rest of the body. If you just spin it around, he has a little bit on this side, but it's only just a few little areas of these spikes that stick out that get a little bit of that additional green. But if you look really closely, it's not even that they just gone in there and painted a dense green over top of it. It almost looks like, actually, in all the cases of the green, it looks like they used a slightly translucent green, a slightly translucent paint. So when they painted over top of this surface, you could still sort of see the detailing that was done underneath that in the first place. Of course, not much else really does change to the body. You're pretty much getting still the standard sculpting of the initial release of Godzilla. Now again, just soaked and covered in the green. It works really quite well. Would everybody be inclined to pick up both versions of Godzilla? I think more people picking up Godzillas are the purists that want to probably get every single release of Godzilla. So I would probably suspect yes, unless specifically you like Godzilla vs. Biollante and then maybe you're inclined to probably just pick up the original. Might be the only time that you may decide then to pass on this one. But certainly there's virtue to be had for this particular release. Simply not just because he's covered in slime and makes him a variant, but also for the fact that even though there is just green paint that's added to his body, they've done it in such a way that it still shows the character and the personality to his face, still adds and doesn't take anything away from the sculpt that they did to the body, and still there's enough of the rest of Godzilla's body that you don't lose any bit of the rest of the sculpting. There's still a lot of that happening in the tail, still a lot of that in his quite hefty folded legs. Godzilla, despite the fact of still covered in slime, still apparently wants to miss leg day, as these legs on Godzilla are quite substantially large. So, looking at the figure's articulation, we'll once again go back to the head, the same place where we started with the other review of him. His head rotates all the way around. And I did mention this before, and I'll mention it again. He has just enough of a gap in between the neck area and the head that allots for some additional movement, where you can move the head back and forth, and you can also move it up and down. You don't see that too often with a lot of the Godzilla releases. Like, the head tends to be about the same size as the neck. So I don't feel like you get as much the flexibility to move the head as you do with this particular release. Of course, we already had a look at the fact that his mouth does open and close. Very nicely done again on the interior of the mouth with the teeth and the tongue. Then he has articulation at the base of the neck, basically right there. He has a ball joint happening there as well. Ball joint also there in the torso, so you can rotate that back and forth. Sometimes while you are moving it, you may find the plates here rubbing up against one another, as you can sort of see here happening right now when I start turning the torso. As for the arms rotate all the way around. They hinge outward. Normally, Godzillas, I believe, tend to have bicep articulation. This one doesn't actually have it. It has hinges in the elbows, and that's the same place as well, where the forearms can also rotate all the way around, just like that. The hands also do rotate independently on their own. And there's also articulation, like with the other Godzilla release, on his 3 fingers. Now his 3 fingers also covered in this slime. Love, just again, the fact that they added this sheen to the plastic, so it does make him look constantly wet, with little to no chance of ever really drying. Then, of course, you get to the rest of his body, a good hefty back portion of Godzilla happening here. Forward and back on the legs. Generally, when you are rotating the legs back and forth, they tend to want to swivel outward. They don't swivel too far forward and back, more or less just because the way that the angle is on that ball joint. This is the kind of posability that you're going to result in getting with the legs. He does have a little bit, just a little bit of articulation in the lower leg, just simply because there's so much sculpt and plastic happening up above it. Then he does also have articulation in the feet. You can rotate those all the way around. You can hinge them down, you can hinge them up, and you can also rock them back and forth. I don't see any additional green on his feet. They apparently have gotten away unscathed by the fact that he got soaked everywhere else. Then when you get to the tail, we had looked at this before. The articulation isn't everywhere. Everywhere there's a line doesn't necessarily mean there's an articulation point. So you have a ball joint here, then you have a ball joint here, then you have a ball joint here. Skipping this part as well. You have also an additional ball joint here and also here in the tail. So they've actually very conveniently hidden some of the articulation points with the natural sculpted areas of the tail. So it's sort of from a distance, it looks like actually you have a lot of possibility in the tail, when it's actually every 2, it seems. Then you get to the smaller area of the tail where there's additional ball joint there, and then there's an additional ball joint there, and then there's an additional ball joint on the end of the tail. He has little to no in the way of the wire frame, usually a calling card for the NECA Godzilla releases. In this case, actually, they've gone the route instead of going a ball joint, and it sort of works to his favor, because like with the other Godzilla release, it means you can actually curl his tail up a lot higher than you can with some of the other releases we've seen before. Lastly, we'll bring in the other Godzilla again so you guys can see the difference between the two. Most of it is just cosmetic. They haven't redesigned the mold. The mold worked fine as it was before. They simply have just decided to splash this one with a nice fluorescent green. The resulting in that is not only do you get yourself a variant to the one that we had looked at before, but you actually get a little bit more personality in Godzilla, especially in his face, where things like his eyes stand out much more than the first one that we had a look at. So it would seem that Godzilla had a bit of a problem getting the mist of Biollante covered over top of his body. I mean, let's really face facts here. Who would have an easy time being covered in slime coming from Biollante's mouth? The end result is a bit of an allergic reaction for Godzilla, right down to the fact when it came to the figure release, NECA Toys went to the finest of details and even add bloodshot eyes. That's a nice little touch. Of course, the figure itself doesn't change at all. Even the accessory of the fire breath comes included with this figure, came also the same with the original Godzilla that we looked at. So it really comes then down to what they execute here on paint. Not simply just saying to themselves, well, we have an extra mold, we have this Godzilla anyways, why don't we just release another figure and just put something on him? At least in this case, it's movie specific. He looks like this in the film, so why not take an existing mold that already was working for them and just cover him in this fluorescent green and yellowish slime paint? And it works quite well on him, even down to the fact that they actually did make his body look wet, which is the original Godzilla didn't have that. So it's not just simply they added some green paint, packaged it up and said, here, there you go. They've actually done a lot to this figure, even though its existing mold brother already exists. The previously looked at Godzilla. Just an FYI though, if you look at the front of the packaging here, you'll also see Biollante, or Biollante, depending on how you pronounce the name of the creature, you'll see his package artwork is different than the one we looked at before. The first package of the first Godzilla package artwork depicts Biollante in his first form, in her first form, with the flower head. And this is her second form, more resembling the lizard creature that Godzilla fights near the end of the movie. So a nice touch is even just to change the packaging. They've also done that also with the Godzilla Tokyo SOS, distinctly making the package different from one another so that you don't have to open up the flap to see inside which Godzilla you actually have. It also means when you put them on display, each one of the boxes have unique artwork. So it's a nice touch on NECA's part. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of the repaint of Godzilla and Biollante. And if you've had picked up or will be picking up the Godzilla, will you venture out to be picking up the slime-colored Godzilla as well? A big thank you as well to the folks over at NECA Toys who provided the sample of both regular Godzilla versus Biollante and slime-colored Godzilla. Poor Godzilla. You got to imagine that's going to be impossible to wash off. I mean, I've stained shirts. I know how impossible they are to get off. It's probably a little bit different than getting spaghetti sauce on your shirt. Needless to say, if you're liking the content you're seeing and want to stay on board and see more content on this channel, consider the idea of hitting that subscribe button down below, turning the bell notification on. And just an FYI, Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you'll find new videos popping up on this channel. There's definitely going to be a lot more NECA reviews coming your way. Even though we're sort of wrapping things up with Godzilla for the time being, there's definitely going to be a lot more NECA reviews lined up and coming soon. So keep your peepers peeled for those. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.